It wouldn't seem like Brooklyn Beckham drama would have anything to do with politics, but in the multi-billion-dollar celebrity gossip industry, there's an emerging alt-right pipeline. Gossip consumers are being subtly pushed in the direction of right-wing content creators and conservative ideologies through stories that capture their attention, and this is one of them. For decades, the Beckhams have been A-listers in the world of celebrity gossip. For starters, there's David Beckham, the family patriarch, who's most famous for his soccer career in the UK. There's David Beckham, who is the most famous for his soccer career, and Victoria Beckham, otherwise known as Posh Spice from the Spice Girls. They got married in the late 90s and welcomed their first child, Brooklyn Beckham. And a few years ago, in 2022, Brooklyn married Nicola Peltz, a billionaire heiress. He changed his name to Brooklyn Peltz Beckham in the process. Now, for years at this point, there's been tabloid speculation about Brooklyn's relationship with Nicola. And there's been this narrative that has emerged that she has sort of isolated him and driven a wedge between Brooklyn and his parents. There's wall to wall coverage in British tabloids, social media gossip forums, and basically around the world. But earlier this week, Brooklyn released a bombshell statement on his own Instagram stories, basically saying that the rumors weren't true and it was his decision to grow separated from his family. This was a long statement, but here are a few noteworthy excerpts. Brooklyn wrote, "I have been silent for years and made every effort to keep these matters private. Unfortunately, my parents and their team have continued to go to the press, leaving me with no choice but to speak for myself and tell the truth about only some of the lies that have been printed. I do not want to reconcile with my family. I'm not being controlled. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life. For my entire life, my parents have controlled narratives in the press about our family. The performative social media posts, family events, and inauthentic relationships have been a fixture of the life I was born into. Recently, I've seen with my own eyes the lengths that they'll go through to place countless lies in the media, mostly at the expense of innocent people to preserve their own facade. But I believe the truth always comes out." Brooklyn then goes on to talk about a few specific allegations related to his 2022 wedding, including that his mother pulled out at the last second of designing his wife's wedding dress, that she danced inappropriately with him at the wedding, and that his family and his brothers attacked him on social media afterward. He wrote, "My wife has been consistently disrespected by my family, no matter how hard we've tried to come together as one. My mom has repeatedly invited women from my past into our lives in ways that were clearly intended to make us both uncomfortable." And then finally, he wrote, "The narrative that my wife controls me is completely backwards. I've been controlled by my parents for most of my life. I grew up with overwhelming anxiety. For the first time in my life since stepping away from my family, that anxiety has disappeared. I wake up every morning grateful for the life I chose and have found peace and relief." Now, immediately after Brooklyn made this statement, there was this big wave of support that came forward, especially from people who related to this dynamic and some who have even gone no contact with their own families. But soon after that wave of support, there was an even bigger wave of backlash, predominantly happening on social media. In my reporting for Spitfire News, a few interesting things about this stood out to me. First of all, Brooklyn's allegations and the backlash that followed are very reminiscent to me of what happened with the British royal family, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle over the past several years. And some of the same prominent accounts who have attacked Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have now pivoted to join an anti-Brooklyn Beckham bandwagon. They're calling him a spoiled, ungrateful brat, claiming that he's lying, saying that he needs to be a man, and just basically shaming and smearing Brooklyn and Nicola. There's also a false viral rumor circulating on social media that Nicola Peltz pushed her nanny down the stairs as a child and that it even resulted in the nanny's death. But I looked into this and there's no evidence that any nanny was ever involved in an accident like this or died on the job while working for Nicola and her family. It was kind of just a fabrication made up out of nowhere that has nonetheless gone viral. And that's not to say that there isn't anything to criticize about these people. Nicola's father, Nelson Peltz, is a multi-billionaire who bragged about introducing his friend Donald Trump to his other friend Elon Musk. So there's certainly a lot of power, privilege, and even conservatism at play within these families. However, something else I noticed about this fallout online is that people are going out of their way to bully Brooklyn and Nicola over things that have no relation to the conflict or the allegations. They're they're making things up and making them go viral. And in addition to that, people are relying on biased sources who have kind of a track record for spreading misinformation, smear campaigns, and even explicitly pushing their audiences toward right wing conservative beliefs. This lends itself to something that people have noticed online, which is a growing right wing pipeline that starts with celebrity gossip. Basically, the way that it works is pop culture enthusiasts and people who care about these types of narratives go looking online for more information. They get sucked into snark subreddits, they go down TikTok rabbit holes, they find YouTubers and other content creators who agree with their pre existing opinions. And then that leads them algorithmically and through affiliation with some of these ideologies at play right into the hands of conservative propaganda. I thought this point was really interesting. The original poster on X says, blind items, snark pages, and gossip culture in general is the alt right pipeline for a lot of people, especially women. And the quote tweet says, literally, it makes you more hateful, more susceptible to conspiracy theories, and less likely to question what you're told. Even if you think it's just about celebrities, that way of thinking seeps into your brain and shapes how you see people and the world. With the backlash to Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, one of the things that sticks out to me is how so much of this ideology is rooted in upholding a patriarchal status quo. You have people online saying that Brooklyn Beckham needs to be more of a man and that it's wrong for him to be disrespectful to his parents or ever speak out against them in any way. You have a lot of people supporting Victoria Beckham just because she's posh spice. And there's sort of a parasocial stan culture element here that really feeds into the idea that anyone speaking up against mistreatment or abuse or controlling and toxic power dynamics is automatically in the wrong. This obviously feeds into the broader Me Too movement and the idea that it's the victim's fault for raising awareness of a problem rather than the perpetrator's fault for their behavior that's at the root of the conflict. I mentioned that multi billion-dollar ecosystem around celebrity gossip, and today that doesn't just include the tabloids, it also includes thousands of online commentators who have built really profitable niches in distilling this content for wide audiences. When I looked up Brooklyn Beckham on YouTube and scrolled through some of the most popular videos about the conflict, I stumbled on this woman, Tisa Tells. She's a YouTuber with over 600,000 subscribers who brands herself as kind of an independent journalist. Her banner says she does research, investigation, and opinion, and that she's Karma's chief correspondent. When I look at some of her top videos on the platform, there are a lot of red flags that come to mind. First of all, some of these stories strike me as not true and rooted in disinformation, and they also all push a pretty specific narrative about women. Women are really demonized in a lot of this content, which has to do with pretty ordinary dynamics between male and female celebrities. Things like marriages, divorces, prenups, allegations of abuse. And when it comes to the way that she's covering the Beckham drama, it follows a lot of the same patterns. For example, you have stories like I Warned You, Yolanda Hadid's secret message to Victoria about Nicola, and Victoria sends warning, her brutal warning that Nicola will take everything. These stories aren't rooted in anything true or any evidence that we actually have. They're just speculation that assumes the woman in the situation is the bad guy. And that pushes really pervasive cultural biases against women, no matter what the situation entails. A lot of these narratives also really strip Brooklyn Beckham's agency from the equation. It was his decision to make this statement and his desire to not reconcile with his family. But still, the culture wants to blame his wife, which is an all too familiar narrative against wives. In addition to these pop culture pseudo journalists who traffic in a lot of misogyny, you also have really established conservative voices jumping on these pop culture bandwagons. Megyn Kelly is a great example of this. If you look at Megyn Kelly's YouTube channel, where she has over 4 million subscribers, most of her content is pretty traditional conservative political coverage. For example, you have her commentary on people protesting ICE, that basically is demonizing them too. You have her siding with Trump's administration and major conservative figures. Titles like Hypocrites, Tim Walz and Zohran Mamdani urge good trouble and bash ICE. The mentality of permanent activists on the left. And why anti-ICE church protest should be a wake-up call for Christians everywhere. But in addition to that conservative political coverage, Megyn Kelly is also bringing in viewers who might not otherwise care about that content by talking about Brooklyn Beckham.
You are so stylish. Can you please tell me where you buy your outfits from? Wendy, I'm going to give it to you straight. I have a stylist. Her name is Molly, and she does most of the work for me. I'm not very stylish, to be honest with you. I just do what Molly tells me. So I pay her, a fee and she does the shopping. On my budget, I will say one of my favorite designers is Victoria Beckham. I love her clothing. She makes stuff, it's almost like it's just for me. It's very rare that I don't like a Victoria Beckham offering. Just think her dresses are so beautiful. Her style is impeccable. And I admire her too. But I don't always shop.
So, interestingly enough, Megyn Kelly's bias and sort of her input on the Brooklyn Beckham situation is informed by the fact that she's just a big fan of Victoria Beckham. And this is also the trajectory of a lot of the online discourse around this. Here's a viral tweet I saw circulating about Brooklyn Beckham. It says, "Babe, we're not canceling Posh Spice. Some people are foundational mothers. The Spice Girls are a structural pillar of our shared reality. We all experienced that or are currently living through the impact of that. Sorry, Brooklyn. Also, your wife allegedly killed her nanny, lol." So, commentary like this is something that I think of as being stan brained. A stan is basically just an irrational fan. And obviously, this is an irrational reason to not believe someone when they come forward about toxic and controlling behavior. Nonetheless, it's a really popular way of thinking. And commentators like Megyn Kelly and other conservative YouTubers have picked up on this. They use this really conversational style, they appeal to everyday viewers, but at the end of the day, they're pushing these ideological biases against women that feed directly into their core conservative belief systems. Megyn Kelly is able to get more views and more diverse audience members, which she can then funnel into her coverage about things like ICE. So, all of this to say, even if you don't care about the Beckhams at all, this does matter, and it does have a deeper political connotation than it implies on the surface. In today's social media environment, news consumers are being funneled very quickly from one topic to the next, with algorithms playing a huge role in what we see and what we end up caring about. So, for people who do care about celebrity gossip, the current algorithms and content creators out there are pushing them in an overall more conservative direction, which is why, even if you don't want celebrity gossip to matter, it kind of does a little bit. Plus, at the end of the day, the way we view these celebrity interpersonal conflicts trickles down and impacts how we view everyday people going through the same situations. Family drama, family estrangement, even bad wedding behavior are nothing out of the ordinary. These are just extraordinary people living through everyday circumstances.